It was kept secret, buried beneath a road of Boston cobblestone and a century and a half of loyalty oaths. No one was ever supposed to learn this tale. The official records, they were destroyed. The witnesses, they disappeared. The Beacon Hill house where it occurred, it was dismantled in the middle of the night. Each brick crushed into dust and dispersed in the harbor. They wished to eliminate it from memory, from history itself. But some truths, they take hold. They seep through the earth of time, tainting the present with questions that weren't ever supposed to be asked. And the principal question, the question that dogged a few to their deaths, is an easy one, a frightening one. What became of the Callahan sisters, Elara and Isolde? During the spring of 1871, they were 16 and 17 years old. The luminous, daughters of a shipping tycoon, famed for their intelligence and their near-ethereal beauty. During the winter of 1891, 20 years hence, they were still 16 and 17 years old, not only in appearance, in all measurable biological senses. They never aged, not by a single day, and the secret behind why it was not a miracle. It was a deal, a ghastly agreement struck in the dark corners of America's most esteemed city. How did this just disappear from history? How does something so implausible, so central to our knowledge of life and death, just get lost? The answer is more chilling than the enigma itself, because it implies that the world you believe you know is a stage painstakingly set, and behind the scenes are forces which manipulate the very laws of nature for their own purposes. This is not a tale of two girls who freeze time. It is about what was taken from them and from us in order to protect their secret. It is about an ability so great it has created the world we know today, and you have no idea it exists. But you're about to. This tale came across me. A worn leather trunk purchased at an old estate sale in rural Massachusetts, within not family heirlooms but one wax-sealed journal. The personal account of Dr. Alistair Finch, a doctor once renowned in Boston society, then suddenly scandalized and committed to an asylum where he died in 1902. His offense: he would not forget the Callahan sisters. You're not simply observing this. You're becoming a part of it. Dr. Finch's story starts not with the sisters, but with their father, Marcus Callahan, a ruthless and brilliant man who clawed his way up from the docks to the top of Boston society. He was ruthless, intelligent, and according to Finch, driven by a singular, all-consuming fear, the fear of loss. He had lost his wife to a sudden fever, and the event drove him mad. He became fixated on preservation, on permanence. He invested in experimental medicine, in odd new philosophies whispering out of Europe. He was a man, Finch writes, who would trade with the devil himself to retain what was his. His world in 1871 were his daughters. Elara the elder was intelligent and inquiring. Isolde was the artist, kind and perceptive. They were the gems of his existence, but they were fragile too. A cough, a chill, the slightest indication of illness would throw Marcus into panic. He kept them in gilded quarantine, isolated from the world. Finch was the family doctor, and he can tell us of his increasing discomfort. He witnessed two young, healthy women being smothered by a father's affection, an affection that was turning ugly, turning desperate, turning possessive. And then in May of 1871, both sisters contracted the same wasting illness that had killed their mother. Finch's journal entries grow hysterical. He speaks of Marcus Callahan as a man near madness, unwilling to accept the diagnosis, keeping Finch out of the girls' chambers for days at a time. And when finally Finch was let in, he discovered the girls transformed. The fever had disappeared. The weakness was gone. They shone brighter than ever before, but there was a quiet in their eyes, a serene, unnerving calm that did not fit into two young women who had just looked death straight in the face. Marcus described it as a miracle. He sent Finch away with a warm but firm last payment. But Finch couldn't keep himself from the thought that he hadn't seen a recovery. He had seen an exchange. Something had been removed from that home and something else, something unnatural, had been brought in. He says, "I saw not the blush of health upon their cheeks, but the cold polish of porcelain." For the following 5 years, Finch observed from afar. The Callahan sisters became a staple of Boston's high society, but they never actually belonged. They were specimens, nicely preserved, always smiling, their laughter never actually reaching their eyes. They gave salons, went to balls, but Finch observed that their talk was reflections of something they'd learned years earlier. Their opinions never developed. Their jokes never varied. It was as if their minds, like their bodies were trapped in amber. They were lovely dolls brought to life by a recollection of what they had been. The rumors started around 1876. They were merely rumors at first, how the Callahan girls simply did not age, how their style was always that of 5 years ago. But rumor in a town like Boston, it turned slowly, but finally. Friends from childhood wedded, had children, and started to exhibit the first hints of age on their faces. Not Elara and Isolde. They stayed unblemished, untouched. A hushed historical gossip from the era uncovered in an old society column states, "To behold the Callahan sisters is to see a photograph live, a flash of the past etched in time." One wonders if Mr. Callahan's passion is a blessing or an art form by a taxidermist. This eerie remark was more prevalent than its creator could have ever imagined. Finch, obsessed now, opened his own personal investigation. He called on contacts to talk to former servants of the Callahan estate. They were mostly tight-mouthed, bought out with generous pensions, but one, a young housemaid named Clara, who had been fired, would talk to him in confidence. She explained about a man who came to the house while the girl was ill, a man who was not a doctor. He came in a carriage without a crest towards the end of night. She referred to him as tall and impossibly gaunt, with eyes that would not blink. He held a locked iron box, and was with Marcus Callahan for hours in the study. Once he had gone, the house seemed cold, unchangingly cold. She said the sisters after their recovery would sometimes just stop. They would remain in a hallway or sit in a chair for an hour or more motionless, waiting for orders. Clara's testimony ignited a flame in Finch's mind. The protagonist, the iron box. This was not a miracle remedy. This was a procedure. He plumbed the depths of the city, made his way into the world of occultists, charlatans, and backstreet doctors who performed for the desperate fancies of the elite. He looked for any reference to men who traded in permanence. His diary of this time is a plunge into a shadow realm. He describes secret sales where prohibited books were traded for fortunes of whispers about a Boston cabal of the city's leading men, industrialists, judges, scholars who aimed to subdue not the commerce world but the world of natural law. They referred to themselves as the Stygian Fellowship. Their ambition was nothing short of the arrest of time itself. It was madness, the ravings of a bereaved man. But Finch was systematic. He matched names, aides, financial reports. He found that a small elite clique of men, Marcus Callahan included, had been routing huge amounts of money into an electronic front organization, the Boston Society for Chronological Study. Surface: it was an upright academic association devoted to history and preservation, but Finch intuited its real intention was much more sinister. He thought that they were not only researching time, but were trying to control it. He discovered an odd connection. All men in this inner circle had endured a deep loss, typically a wife or a child. They were bonded by something other than greed, but a common pathological fear of death, and they would pay any cost to do any evil to vanquish it. He says, they talk of progress and enlightenment, but their way goes back to the oldest, darkest sorcery. They desire the power of the gods, but they have the hearts of cowering children who will trade anything or anyone to keep their toys from being broken. Honestly, what would you do if you had the power? If you could freeze a moment, a person, perfect, and keep them forever, the temptation would be huge, and the price, unthinkably high. By 1881, a decade had elapsed since the miraculous recovery of the sister. They were women in their late 20s now, but they still stayed in the bodies of teenagers. The magic was starting to fade. What had been a novelty was turning into a monstrous spectacle. Society that had once swooned over them now shuddered with a sort of horror fascination. Invitations began to decline. The Callahan house on Beacon Hill was now a source of rumor and terror. It was no longer home. It was a museum of 2 living specimens. Finch was able to get Elara, the older sister, to meet with him under the auspices of a social visit. He had to see for himself. He relates the meeting in his journal, in an attitude of deep sadness. He discovered her in the conservatory among plants that had bloomed and died and been replaced 10 times while she did not change. Her skin, he wrote, retains the radiance of fine marble, yet also its chill. Her eyes are bright, but the mind behind them is a tape recorder. She told me about a concert she had been to last week, but the concert she spoke of occurred in 1872. I questioned her about the future, about her dreams. She gazed at me with a calm, lovely blankness and said, "The future is today, Dr. Finch. It is always today." It was the most horrific thing he had ever heard. She was not alive, not really. She was looping. Her awareness was stuck in the same loop of memories constantly replaying. She was a captive in her own flawless, unchanging form. The bargain her father arranged hadn't simply halted her aging, it had halted her from growing. As he departed, she slipped a small crumpled piece of paper into his palm, her serene facade cracking for an instant, a flash of raw, unadulterated fear in her eyes. "He watches," she breathed, her voice a dusty whisper. "He always watches." On the paper was a solitary cryptic sketch, a serpent devouring its own tail, but within the circle was a sketch of a flowering lotus flower being slowly strangulated, a symbol of life and rebirth being strangled by a symbol of infinity. It was a message, a call for assistance by a trapped soul within an unbreachable cage of beauty. The symbol that Orbara strangling the lotus became Finch's fixation. It was not a recognized alchemical or cult symbol. It was precise. It was a key. He spent months in the dusty tomes of Boston libraries, delving through old books, searching for a match. He finally found it in a privately printed, exceedingly rare book bound in human skin. A book so obscene that it had only been whispered about, the Somnus Infinitum, or the Endless Sleep. The book was not about magic in the sense of the stage. It was a kind of proto-scientific manual, a grimoire of biological manipulation. It described a process, a transference where the vital regenerative life force, the bloom of one subject, could be used to create a state of stasis in another. It didn't grant immortality, it granted permanence, but the cost was monstrous. To make one thing permanent, something else had to be consumed. It needed a constant supply of life energy. It wasn't an isolated operation. It was a subscription, a parasitic relationship. The novel detailed the construction of a vessel, a living anchor that would suck life energy from a source and direct it into the subject. The subject would be trapped in flawless, immobile stasis. The vessel would. The book was evasively horrific. It simply spoke of the vessel as the withered prince. The source, it suggested, needed to be living material, full of vigor. The drawing from Allah was a diagram. The serpent was the stasis, the endless loop. The lotus was the life force being consumed. The Callahan sisters weren't just frozen in time. They were the end point of a horrifying biological circuit. Their unnatural permanence was being fueled by the slow, systematic draining of something or someone else. Suddenly, a string of unexplained disappearances that had bedeviled Boston's most impoverished neighborhoods for a decade acquired a horrific new significance. Young men and women vanished from the streets, never to be seen or heard from again. The police were in the dark, but Finch had an explanation as well, one too sinister to consider. Were these missing souls the key? Were their lives the energy for the sisters' perpetual youth? This was a machine of flesh and blood. Finch knew he was on the edge of a cliff. This was no longer merely about the Callahan sisters. It was about a conspiracy that made human life a raw material. The Stygian Fellowship was not merely a support group for bereaved fathers. It was a highly advanced vampiric business. He needed to locate the vessel, the shriveled prince, the biological motor powering this entire nightmare. His investigation took him to a private sanatorium on the outskirts of Boston, an institution maintained by a consortium of benefactors whose names were secret. A roster of names suspiciously close to the membership of the Stygian Fellowship, the Brooklyn Asylum for the chronically afflicted, not for the mentally ill, for patients suffering from rare degenerative diseases, or so they said. Finch gained entrance by using a letter of recommendation that had been forged, pretending to be a doctor interested in their new treatment procedures. The director, a harsh, frigid man by the name of Dr. Silas Croft, took him on a tour of the spotless, silent facility. Everything was clean, neat, and profoundly unnerving. All the patients were kept in isolated rooms, their faces concealed behind veiled screens. Croft told him it was to give them dignity. Finch understood it was to conceal their identities. He was able to swipe a patient roster. On it he saw a name that chilled his blood. Thomas Callahan, Marcus Callahan's son, his firstborn son, who had supposedly died of a rare genetic condition at age 10, years before the sisters were born. He hadn't died, though. He'd been concealed. He was the vessel. He was the withered prince. Late at night, Finch unlocked the door to Thomas's room. The entry in his journal is nightmare material. Thomas was alive, or at least that's what it was, I suppose. Ancient, 100 years old, but still in the body of a child. His skin parchment-colored, his limbs wasting away, his breathing a faint gasp. But he was connected by a series of strange whirring devices and glass tubes filled with a faintly glowing fluid to a central machine in the room. A machine that hummed with a low predatory energy. And his eyes were open. They were ancient, lucid, and filled with an agony so profound it was almost a physical force. He couldn't speak, but his eyes screamed. Finch had discovered the engine. Marcus Callahan hadn't only killed strangers to keep his daughters alive. He had killed his own son. The ugliness of the discovery nearly destroyed him. Marcus Callahan had made his own son a living battery, a dry, forgotten god powering the artificial lives of his flawless sisters. Thomas was the hidden shame, the grotesque cost for the family's miracle. His gradual rot was their immortality. The radiant liquid in the tubes, it must be the drawn-out life force, the bloom. It was being drained from Thomas, purified by this whirring mystical device, and then somehow transferred to Ara and his. But how? Finch realized he couldn't remain. Dr. Croft's eyes had a spark of suspicion. He had to escape, but he couldn't go without evidence. He employed a small syringe he had brought to extract a sample of the glowing liquid from one of the tubes. He also noticed on a small table next to the bed a silver locket. He pocketed it. It was a futile, idiotic thing to do, but he felt driven, an impulse. He escaped from the asylum, his heart pounding against his ribs, the little warm vial of liquid searing in his pocket. Back in his laboratory, he put the substance under his strongest microscope. It was something he had never seen before. It was not blood. It was not plasma. It was alive. Small glowing particles such as star-like microscopic sparks swam inside the fluid, filled with a slow rhythmic glow. It was raw and pure vitality. It was life itself, divested of its container. A chilling line from the Somnus Infinitum returned to him. The light of the soul can be decanted like good wine, and the dregs left behind. He pulled open the locket he'd stolen. Within were two small portraits. On one, a young healthy lad of around 10, Thomas before his change. On the other, a portrait of a woman Finch didn't know, a lovely woman with dark, defied eyes. Under her image, a small inscription, Lenora, my life, my blue. Who had been Lenora? And why was her image in a locket in Thomas's bedroom? The name wasn't mentioned in any of the Callahan family histories. Another ghost, another fragment of the puzzle that suggested an even greater, more profound crime than the one he had already discovered. This device didn't start with Thomas. It started with her. Finch's probe had become a desperate race against time. He was certain the Fellowship would find out he had infiltrated the asylum. They would come for him. He needed to reveal the whole scheme before they could kill him. He employed his remaining contacts, calling in markers from men who owed him, to investigate Marcus Callahan's history, looking in particular for the name Lenora. The response returned from a retired city clerk, a man with good memory and dislike for Boston's high society. Lenora was no society lady. She was an inventor, a highly talented self-taught biologist and engineer, who in the 1850s had been on the cusp of revolutionary advances in cellular regeneration. She had written advance papers, eliciting both acclaim and a condemnation for her revolutionary theories on controlling life force. She thought aging was not predetermined, but a bug in the cellular code which could be fixed. And then in 1858, she disappeared. Her laboratory went up in a strange fire. Her work was gone. The official finding labeled it a tragic accident. The clerk revealed something different to Finch. He explained that Marcus Callahan, a young, ambitious industrialist at the time, had been her chief patron. He had been in love with her, not merely her intellect, but with her. He had asked her to marry him. She had rejected him, preferring to be on her own, committed to her research. Shortly afterward, her laboratory burned, and she vanished. Callahan, a short time later, wed his socially approved wife, the mother of his children. The reality had been a snowslide of terror. Marcus Callahan hadn't merely discovered this omnis infinitum. He had taken its principles from Lenora. He had envied her brilliance, and when he couldn't have her, he stole her work, probably killing her, burning her lab to cover up his thievery. The whole Stygian Fellowship, the whole monstrous machine of sacrifice was founded on the stolen brilliance of a woman who history had conveniently forgotten. This wasn't about keeping his kids safe. This was about a history of theft and murder. Lenora had been the first victim. She'd been the source, and Finch suspected with an icy fear that her work had been much more sophisticated and much more sinister than even the Somnus Infinitum indicated. The pieces were now beginning to fall into place, painting a picture of evil so systematic, so profoundly embedded in the power structure of the city, that Finch experienced a wave of complete despair. The Callahan sisters were more than a family tragedy. They were living emblems of a monstrous secret society founded on hijacked knowledge and human sacrifice. The Stygian Fellowship not only saved their loved ones, they applied this pilfered technology as the ultimate means of control. Finch discovered proof of financial transactions, blackmail, political engineering. Men who dared to go against the interests of the Fellowship saw their careers destroyed, their families intimidated. Judges issued puzzling decisions. Politicians voted out of the public interest. The Fellowship's power was a cancer infecting the city's arteries. The stasis technology was not applied to their children alone. He discovered hints of its other uses. A political opponent muzzled, not by murder but by being stuck in a living catatonia in some private asylum. A master business competitor. His mind immobilized just when he was about to make a breakthrough. It was the ultimate weapon. A murder without a corpse. A prison without chains. Imagine that. Being able to just stop a person in their tracks, to take them off the board without any hint of violence. The power would be total. Finch realized he was no longer merely an investigator. He was a threat to an unseen empire. He started to notice shadows everywhere. Men in gray jackets lurking outside his apartment. His mail was being intercepted. Friends suddenly became standoffish, their eyes brimming with fear when he drew near. He was being groomed, set aside for elimination. He concealed his journal, the vial of liquid, and the locket in the leather trunk's false bottom, confiding in the sole individual whom he believed he could trust, his estranged brother out in the countryside, with the charge to open it only after his death. He was aware of what lay ahead. His last journal entry prior to his commit is hardly a whisper. They will declare that I am mad. They will employ the devices of my own trade to discredit me. They will embalm me in a white-walled chamber and inform the world that I was deluded. But I am sane. I have witnessed the machine under the garden. I have witnessed the dried god which energizes the ageless angels. The truth is here. The truth seeps through. Seek it out. Avenge us. Avenge Lenra. The official explanation for Dr. Alistair Finch's downfall was rapid and tragic. A statement was released in the Boston Medical Society, pronouncing him a threat to himself and his patients, alleging a deep fascination with wild conspiracies and death delusions. His colleagues and friends attested to his more and more erratic behavior. His family, unquestionably under pressure, consented to his being committed. He was removed from society as neatly and effectively as a line of chalk on a blackboard. He spent his final 10 years in the Danvers State Asylum, where he never uttered a word more. As records indicate, he would just sit by the window, looking out towards Boston, drawing occasionally in the dust on the windowsill, a serpent devouring its own tail with a withering lotus within. And what of the Callahan sisters? Once Finch's shame, they were secluded from society altogether. The Beacon Hill mansion became a fortress. Marcus Callahan lived until 1899, a recluse in his own home, protecting his flawless, ageless daughters. In his will, upon his death, it was a strange and frightening document. It left all of Callahan's wealth to a charitable trust directed by a board of directors whose names were a who's who of the Stygian fraternity. The major directive of the will was the ongoing care of his stricken children, and Zelda and hapless Thomas, that they would be well and not bothered for the natural balance of their lives, a life that for the sisters would have no end. The house would remain as their secluded home cut off from the world. They became Boston's most renowned ghosts. The women who did not age, ghostly apparitions in a house nobody could ever step into. The legend grew into a local myth. A slice of Gothic lore passed around to scare children. The sinister reality, naturally, was confined with them. But the machine needed to be powered. The abductions didn't abate. They simply became more subtle, harder to follow, controlled by the resources of the Fellowship. The wasted prince in the asylum still had to be fed. The porcelain dolls in the mansion still required their stolen bloom. If you've made it this far, comment "The truth bleeds through" below. You're starting to see that some legends are true. The last the world knew of the story ended in 1905. There was a devastating fire that began in the boiler room and engulfed the Callahan mansion within hours. The fire raged so hot that the whole building burned to the ground into its foundation. When the ashes settled, investigators recovered hardly anything. Officially, it was said that Marcus Callahan's two daughters, Elara and Isolde, died in the U.S. fire. Because of the scorching heat, their bodies were unwoverable, a tidy, clean finish, a tragic but believable end to a bizarre family saga. But there's a different story in Finch's diary. He had predicted this. In a section he had penned in his paranoid last days of liberty, he had fantasized over the Fellowship's game plan. They cannot let the sisters be found. He had written, with advancing medical science, their condition would become an uncontrollable sensation. One blood sample under a microscope today would lay everything bare. The stasis is a product of another time. They will not risk it. They will not heal them. They will sanitize the board. They will incinerate the evidence. They will deem it a tragedy. The blaze was not an accident. It was a purification, a last brutal act of erasure. The Stygian Fellowship was cutting itself off from its most public, most deadly secret. They were future-proofing their conspiracy. But there was one piece of information from the fire that just never added up. A piece of information that had been passed around among the firemen for years. They couldn't find any bodies, not a piece of bone, not a piece of tissue, nothing. The sisters had just vanished into thin air, it seemed. The Fellowship's answer was that the heat was too intense, but veteran fire marshals knew better. Even in the worst possible infernos, something is always left behind. The rumor was the sisters were taken out first before the fire was even lit, that the Fellowship with its mystical knowledge had come up with a new solution for dealing with their assets, that Elara and Isolde weren't burned up, but were merely moved, put back into storage, waiting for the day when their secret could be remade. This is where the tale really falls from fact into nightmare, because if they were not destroyed, where did they go? This was the question that plagued the few who had fragments of the truth. What do you with two well-preserved 17-year-old women who are in fact almost 50 years old? You can't release them. You can't kill them in any normal fashion. You have to conceal them. Following the fire, the Fellowship of the Stygia started to transform. They abandoned their 19th-century occultic trappings and became something much more contemporary and sinister. They become a foundation, a philanthropic trust, a bio-mmed research facility. They transfer their money and power from the gas-lit salons of Boston to the sterile boardrooms and labs of the 20th century. Their names are on universities, hospitals, research grants. They became the silent, unseen planners of the future, and their central endeavor, the mastery of aging and decay, never ceased. It simply went further underground. Finch's diary provides us with the most horrifying hint. He learned from a book he cited, a footnote in the Somnus Infinitum, that the stasis effect could be boosted. It could be placed in dormancy. The subject could be put into a state of suspended animation so deep that they would be marked as deceased to all at the most esoteric inspection. A state referred to as the cold luna. The manuscript accounted for a ritual involving certain chemical substances and resonant frequencies that would allow this state to be induced. It also accounted for how to reverse it. It was a biological off-switch. My hypothesis: the Fellowship did not incinerate the sisters. They sedated them. They shut them down. They may be anywhere. In the sub of a private hospital, in a cryova at a laboratory hidden in plain sight, two immaculate porcelain dolls waiting for their masters to wind them up once more. The fire was mere window dressing. The actual horror is that the Callahan sisters might still be out there, their impossible, weird youth frozen in a sleeping, hidden state, a living proof of a power that has kept itself hidden from the world, a power that has only increased, become more advanced, and is still active today just beneath the surface of our reality. They are the ultimate secret weapon, the ultimate proof of concept, and the men who own them are no longer merely Boston industrialists. They are the undercover kings of the new world. Now we need to discuss the fuel, Thomas. The shriveled prince. The blaze at the Callahan mansion was a public event, but a low-key, unreported occurrence occurred the very next day. The Brookline, home for the chronically ill, experienced its own far smaller fire, a small electrical fire that was limited to one patient's room in a far wing. The patient, an unidentified man who had been an inmate there for decades, succumbed to smoke inhalation. His files were destroyed in the fire. His body was cremated before any family members could be contacted. Another neat, clean conclusion. Dr. Silas Croft, director of the asylum, retired on a fat pension and relocated to a private island in the Caribbean. The Fellowship was purging. They were cutting all ties to their 19th century roots. Thomas, The driving force of the entire operation was obsolete. The sisters were in stasis. The technology probably had advanced. They didn't require a lone withered vessel anymore. Maybe they had discovered a more streamlined means of harvesting the bloom. Maybe the network of vanishings became an industrial-scale operation worldwide. Consider this. The 20th century was replete with turmoil, wars, famines, genocides, unparalleled opportunity for a quiet, systematic group to reap human energy on a large scale, entirely unobtrusive in the midst of greater tragedies. The methods of the Fellowship expanded with the times. They evolved from stealing poppers from Boston streets to influencing world events. A chilling observation from one of Finch's more far-out entries. What if war isn't a failure of diplomacy, but a bountiful harvest? What if the anarchy that frightens us is the ecology that nourishes them? This is the real extent of the conspiracy Finch had uncovered. It wasn't merely about two girls. It was about a clandestine system of power that lives on human life, a system that has entrenched itself within our past. A vial of liquid Finch pilfered from Thomas's room. I sent it in for analysis. I worked through a friend at a commercial state-of-the-art genetics lab, making them think it was a sample from a confidential archaeological excavation. The findings were ambiguous and horrifying. The chief scientist phoned me, his voice shaking. He exclaimed, "The material violated all theoretical biological principles. It had human mitochondrial DNA, but it was configured in a manner that was theoretically impossible." He said it seemed to be a liquid state of pure cellular energy with quantum properties. He couldn't account for it. He implored me to inform him where it was from. I informed him that I couldn't. 2 days afterward, his lab's server crashed catastrophically. All the data from the analysis was gone. All of his backups were destroyed. He was put on indefinite administrative leave. Leave, they know I have it, and they are still cleaning house. You must know the psychology of these men, the Stygian brothers. They do not believe they are evil. They believe they are pioneers, saviors. They believe man and his messianes, his corruption, his mortality is a faulty thing. They believe that they are refining it. They are the gardeners and we are the weeds or sometimes the rare orchids to be saved. They would see losing a few or a few million for the sake of ultimately having control over life and death as not being criminal. Rather, it is a great necessary act of evolution. They are post-human. They have surpassed the universal moral standard. Finch knew this. He wrote, "To argue with them on matters of morality is to argue with a surgeon on the sanctity of the flesh he dissects. They perceive only the mechanism, the system. They have lost sight of the soul of the machine. And their strength lies not only in their wealth but in their secrecy and in their patience. They think in terms of centuries, not decades. They have created a dynasty of knowledge that has been transferred from one generation to the next. The kids of the original members are now the older statesmen of our times. They serve on the boards of international corporations. They finance political campaigns. They define public opinion by owning the media empires. You have probably seen their faces on the news, read their names in financial reports. You admire their success, their longevity, their seemingly ageless vigor. You attribute it to good genes, clean living, expensive healthcare. You don't see the dark machinery working behind the scenes. You don't see the price that was paid and is still being paid for their good fortune. The Callahan Sisters were their initial test run, a prototype. How many more have there been since then? How many of our world's influential people who appear to resist the attacks of time are in this program? What if money is not even the secret to their power? What if it is time? What if they've learned the secret to stealing it from others? This is the essence of the forbidden truth. The world is not controlled by the people you believe. It is controlled by a silent few who have mastered the one thing the rest of us can't help but be consumed by: death. There's the housemate Clara, the one who informed Finch about the unblinking man. Her statement was the first fissure in the illusion. Once she spoke with Finch, she vanished. Her family was informed that she had accepted a new job with an affluent family in England and would be away for many years. She was never seen or heard from again. But Finch, being the methodical one that he was, dug deeper. He learned that the British millionaire family never existed. The ticket she was said to have bought was for a ship that did not exist. She was another loose end, tidily knotted and discarded. But Clara was smart. She was afraid of Marcus Callahan and his men. She left something behind: insurance. She wrote a long, detailed letter, a complete confession of all that she saw and suspected, and handed it over to her priest, with the condition that it be opened only if she disappeared. The priest, a good man by the name of Father Michael, was appalled. When Clara disappeared, he approached the police. He showed them the letter. An investigation was launched, and subsequently closed immediately. Father Michael was approached by two elegantly dressed men who talked to him of the damage to the reputation. A story as implausible as this could do to the church, as well as to him himself. They talked of the orphanage the church operated, and how it was funded on the charity of certain patrons. The message was received. The letter disappeared from the police evidence room. Father Michael was reassigned to a far western parish, where he died a few years later from a sudden illness. The system covered its own tracks. It worked perfectly. But they overlooked one thing. Before Father Michael was assigned to his new far-off church, he did something very courageous. He copied Clara's letter and he hid it. He hid it in the back of the oldest Bible in his new isolated church. And there it remained for more than a century. A forgotten witness. A ghost's wail in the wilderness. It was discovered in 2019, when the church was being dismantled. The note in the frantic looping script of Clara verifies all of the particulars of Finch's inquiry, but it has one additional horror detail. She witnessed what was in the iron box the unblinking man delivered to the house. She looked through the study keyhole. It was not medical supplies. It was a little metal cage, and in the cage was a bird. A gale and a night, she wrote, sang a song that caused the glass to shudder. A nightingale. The description appears poetic, nearly ridiculous, but in keeping with the pseudo-scientific esotericism of the Fellowship. The Sinus Infinum discusses employing resonant frequencies and sound catalysts to engage the stasis process. It states that an harmonic vibration is required to pin the cellular structure in place. What if the nightingale was not a bird? What if saw was the key, a particular unique biological sound that served as the last switch in 9? The process. A living instrument. Clara explained that following the bird's singing, the room was filled with a fine shimmering dust, and the sisters, who were reclining on couches, appeared to sink into a sleep more profound than death. And when they came out of it, they were altered. This bit opens up a whole frightening new direction. The Fellowship's technology was not chemical or mechanical alone. It was bio-acoustic. It was dependent on tapping the special nature of living organisms, bending them to their own use. And it suggests that their procedures are more subtle and difficult to trace than Finch ever conceived. You wouldn't require a huge humming device. If the catalyst was as brief and simple as a noise, the process could be performed anywhere. The technology could be mobile. The iron box, perhaps it is a full set. Consider the implications. What else of nature have they militarized? What else of the biology secrets have they manipulated into mechanisms of control? We view the world from the perspective of contemporary science, a science they have painstakingly constructed and funded. What if there exists a full other branch of physics, of biology that they have reserved for themselves? A shadow science parallel to our own, a science based on principles that we would call magic or fantasy. The nightingale is a hint that the world we live in is only part of the complete truth. It is a reminder that the most fundamental secrets are not stored in vaults or computer servers. They are concealed in plain sight, in the bird song, in the vibration of a crystal, in the biology we believe we know, and that is why they are so potent, because we don't even know. What do we search for? We don't even know what questions to ask. Let's go back to the sisters themselves. Elara and Isolde. What was going on for them? We have Finch's descriptions, Clara's account, but what was happening inside of them? Finch thought their consciousness was in a loop, stuck in a cycle of past memories. But what if it was even worse than that? What if they knew about the passing of time, about the world outside changing when they were stuck helplessly, appallingly still? Imagine seeing your friends age and pass away, seeing the world you grew up in become something foreign with new technologies, new traditions, new people everywhere, and you stuck in the body and mind of a 17-year-old. It would not be a blessing. It would be the most beautiful kind of torture ever created, a silent, lonely hell. A chilling real-world quote springs to mind from philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. There are no lovely surfaces without a horrific depth. The peaceful, calm loveliness of the Callahan sisters was the surface. The horrific depth was a screaming soul trapped conscious behind it. There is a glimpse of this in Finch's diary. In his last desperate try at comprehension, He had consulted a medium, a well-known Boston spiritualist, Madame Eva. He was a man of reason, and he abhorred what he perceived as cheap histrionics. But he was desperate. He produced the locket that he had taken from Thomas's room. Madame Eva fell into a trance. She did not channel spirits of the dead. She channeled something else. She started to speak in two voices intertwined, one hard and angry, the other gentle and sobbing. Elara and Isolde. Finch's transcript is disjointed, near gibberish. But there are certain phrases. The clock is a liar. A painted face. The song held us down. Father created a mirror, and we are trapped behind glass. So much noise. The world is very loud now. He is so hungry. The boy in the dark room is so hungry. And then the deadliest line of all said in one desperate uniform whisper, "Let us break. Please let us break." They wanted to die. They were praying for the release of rot, of aging, of death. The miracle their father had bestowed upon them was their curse, and they knew every single second of it, horribly and fully aware. This changes everything. They were not passive dolls. They were aware captives. Ara's message to Finch, her whispered, "He watches," was more than a threat. It was a risk, a dying attempt at communication, and the sketch she provided him, the serpent in the lotus, it was more than a symbol she'd read. It was a diagnosis. She knew on some level the character of her own sickness. She was attempting to reveal him the machinery of her prison. This portrays the sisters in a different way. They weren't victims only. They were warriors in the only way they could be quiet, unobtrusive saboteurs of their own gilded prison. This is echoed by another of Clara's points made from her concealed letter. She explained that during the years subsequent to their transmutation, the sisters created a secret language, a set of silent gestures, hand signals, and mutual glances. They would engage in a whole conversation without saying a word, particularly when their father or other fellows were around. Clara thought it was simply a sisterly tick. What if it was something more? What if they were scheming, plotting, exchanging information, keeping their own minds sharp against the creeping timeless stasis? What if they were seeking a means of breaking the spell? This implies that the stasis was not absolute. It had weaknesses. It could be overcome. The human will, the conscious spirit, could push back against the biological cage. Maybe the looping mind Finch saw was not a product of the stasis, but a coping mechanism the sisters formed, a means of grounding their minds, of not allowing them to break entirely apart into the boundless nothing. Today they were not only waiting to be saved, they were attempting to stage it. Ablaze in 1905. We assume the Fellowship ignited it in order to destroy them. But what if we're mistaken? What if the sisters themselves initiated it? What if that was their ultimate desperate act of defiance? A means to burn the house, to burn themselves, and maybe to burn the machine that ensnared them in this existence. It's a frightening prospect that their sole avenue of escape was self-destruction. Yet it's also a tale of extraordinary tragic courage. A final no was yelled into the face of a power that had attempted to steal their very souls. Dead. If the sisters ignited the fire, it changes everything. It means they weren't just pawns on the board. They were players. But it also brings forth a horrific question. Did it succeed? Did they manage to annihilate themselves? Or was the Fellowship there to stop them, to save them from their suicidal act and fling them into the bitter Luna against their will? The evidence is inconclusive. An absence of remains would corroborate either theory. But there is one additional detail from the unpublished notes of the investigating fire marshal, a fellow by the name of Captain Hewitt. He was a hard-working, honest investigator, and was shaken by this case. His official report was clean and concise, but his personal notes, which his grandson gave to a historical repository, are more revealing. Hewitt discovered something in the ruins of the conservatory, the only place Auler had felt any peace. It was the burnt, twisted wreckage of a tiny iron cage, the nightingale's cage. But within it, he discovered something that shouldn't have been there. The blackened, yet still recognizable, wreckage of an intricate clockwork mechanism, a timer, and it was wired to what looked like a chemical ignition system. It was a bomb, an incendiary device intended to ignite a fire of unprecedented ferocity. Hewitt understood. He understood that the fire was not an accident. He presented the evidence to his superiors. He was instructed in no uncertain terms to let it go. He was instructed that the case was closed. He was reminded that he had a family, a pension to maintain. He did what he was told, but he retained the notes. He knew the truth. The sisters attempted to burn their prison to the ground. This was not a suicide. It was an assault. They were not trying to escape. They were attempting to destroy the Fellowship's work, to incinerate the secret of their presence. They were attempting to take their foes with them. This act of resistance, this final blaze of rebellion, is their real legacy, not their eternal beauty, but their desperate, violent struggle to reclaim their own mortality. And it makes it all the more tragic that they could be, to have fought so hard, to have come so close, only to be recaptured and killed by the very things that they were trying to kill. And so where are we? With a tale that has no neat conclusion, with a conspiracy that has long since outgrown and altered beyond all recognition, and with two sisters quite possibly sleeping in a secret vault somewhere, poised for the break of day for a new era. The Stygian Fellowship in its contemporary incarnation is stronger than ever before. They have made their mistakes and learned from them. They are more subtle in their approach. Their power is absolute. They are not a cabal of Boston Brahmins anymore. They are an invisible global network. They are within the code of the algorithms that construct your reality. They are within the chemical structures of the drugs you ingest. They are within the quiet buzz of the satellites that observe you from the sky. They have mastered the art of blending into the crowd. And the technology spawned by Lenora's stolen brilliance and the withered prince's blood has probably progressed to a level we cannot even understand. Maybe now they don't require a stasis. Maybe they've found real regeneration, real immortality, the capacity to turn back the hands of time, to heal any ailment, a power they reserve for themselves, and a few they consider worthy, the ultimate control. Consider the individuals who really control the world, the ones who appear to never lose, who appear to be working on a level of awareness and power that borders on the supernatural. We refer to them as geniuses, titans, visionaries. What if they are just old, very, very old? What if they are the original members of the Fellowship, their lives prolonged by a century of pilfered energy, still playing the grand game with age's wisdom and ruthlessness? It is a chilling idea that we are living in a world still secretly dominated by 19th century robber barons who discovered the ultimate cheat code. The Callahan sisters were the secrets. Their tragedy was the core of this new empire of shadows, and their tale, so long buried, is more than a ghost story. It's a warning. It's a map that leads us to the blueprint of the prison we're all living in, and not even aware. You shouldn't know this, but some secrets just won't be kept. My source is the journal of Dr. Alistair Finch. My evidence is Clara's letter. But the last piece of this puzzle was something I never could have imagined. The locket, the one that was stolen from Thomas's room by Finch, the one with Lara's portrait, the killed inventor. I spent months searching for her surviving relatives. It was practically impossible. Her family line had been erased from documents systematically, but I managed to track down one, a great-Gere Ndniece, who was leading a quiet existence as a librarian in Vermont. I visited her. I presented the locket to her. She had not ever seen it before, but she knew the face. It was her great-great-grandfather Lenora, and she explained to me a legend shared among the women of her family, a whispered truth. They told me that Lenora wasn't only an inventor. She was a mother. She had a son, a brilliant, handsome boy, but the boy had a secret, a weakness, a rare genetic disorder that was causing his body to age at a frightfully accelerated pace, a sickness that would have him aged by the time he was still a teenager. Lenora's study, her fanatical work on cell regeneration, it wasn't for humanity or for fame, it was for him. She was attempting to save her son, and the name of her son, Thomas. The wasted prince was not Marcus Callahan's son. He was Lenorosa's. Callahan didn't only steal her research, he stole her child. He kidnapped the boy, her reason for living, and distorted her research, her cure, as a curse. He used her son as the catalyst to fuel his own daughter's stasis. This is the root crime, the original sin on which the entire fellowship rested. It wasn't merely murder and theft. It was the corruption of a mother's love. Callahan stole the cure she was developing to save her ailing son, and applied it to make his own healthy daughters immortal, unfeeling objects. It is an evil so deep, so intimate, that it nearly defies understanding. The tale isn't only about life stolen. It's about love stolen, motherhood stolen, a future stolen, and it makes the unspoken suffering of Thomas, the shriveled prince, all the more poignant. He wasn't merely a victim. He was the betrayal and abandoned son of the very genius whose art was being employed to torment him. This last disclosure puts it all into perspective. Marcus Callahan's behavior was not the product of a grieving father. It was the product of a monstrous, possessive jealousy. He resented Lenora's brilliance. He resented her son, a child smarter than his own. When he could not have her, he stole everything that belonged to her and warped it into a testament to his own vanity. The Callahan sisters were leaving trophies, evidence that he, Marcus Callahan, could overcome time with the resources of the woman who had turned him down. The Stygian Fellowship was not a brotherhood. Oh, if sorrowful fathers, it was an elite club of arrogant monsters who thought that their money entitled them to possess anything and anyone. They were the ultimate patriarchs, willing to sacrifice other people's children and their own children to secure their dominance. They did not fear loss. They feared obsolescence. They feared the natural cycle whereby the old give way for the new. They wanted to prevent that process so they could create an eternal, unchanging world with themselves at the helm. A universe in which their daughters would never depart from them, in which their authority would never decline. It is the final beacon of tyrannical narcissism. And it is a trend we see over and over again in the annals of time. Powerful men attempting to turn back the clock, attempting to reign in the uncontrollable, with lives broken behind them. A tale of the Callahan sisters is no isolated exception. It's the ultimate expression of an eternal human shadow, a shadow that masquerades as progress, as love, as defense, but which is really just a fearful, hungry ego devouring the world to satiate its own fear of the end. This is what Finch learned, the lesson that led him to what the world referred to as madness. He realized that the most monstrous creatures are not mythical beasts. They are men who believe that their wants are greater than others' lives, men who would set the world ablaze to find themselves in the flames. Now you have to wonder why this tale, and why now. The diary of Dr. Finch, Clara's letter, the fire marshal's report, these fragments have been lost for 100 years. Why are they appearing at once? I think it's because the system is starting to break down. The Fellowship, for all its power and machinations, is not perfect. 100 years of secrets is a weight to bear. New technologies, the very ones they assist in developing, are turning against them. DNA testing, international networks of information, the electronic specters of every communication and transaction. The world is no longer easy to manage. Secrets are not so easily hidden. Maybe a subgroup within the Fellowship itself is spilling this information. A new generation appalled at the crimes of their ancestors, attempting to reveal the truth from within, or maybe something else. Maybe the stasis technology itself is destabilizing. Maybe the porcelain dolls are cracking apart of themselves. The energy that holds them together cannot be sustained indefinitely. The laws of nature, the real laws, can be warped, but they cannot be broken permanently. Entropy wins every time. The universe takes its toll. There is a physics concept called quantum entanglement. Two particles connected in a strange manner, no matter how far they are separated. What occurs to one immediately has an effect on the other. What if the bloom, the life force, works by the same rule? What if all of the souls the Fellowship has absorbed in all the decades are still entangled, an immense network of pilfered existences unseen? And what if that network is starting to push Nate to resist? What if the specters are rising at last, not in a supernatural one, but in a quantum physical one? What if the truth is not simply being revealed, but is actually pushing itself into our existence? The tale of the Callahan sisters is more than just a cautionary lesson from the past. It could be a sign of an impending storm, an accounting that has been building in the darkness for more than 150 years. I have to hope that Finch's actions were not for nothing, that Clara's bravery, Father Michael's trust, Captain Hewitt's honor, that these little gestures of resistance counted. They preserved a spark of the truth alive, handed down through the dark decades like a hidden fire. Now you have had flame passed to you. You, who are seeing this, you are the next connection in the chain. This information is volatile. It alters your perception of the world. You will begin to see the patterns. You will see the figures who appear to transcend time. You will doubt the official histories. You will find the hand of the Fellowship in the odd tides of power that guide our lives. They will seek to dismiss it. They will label it as a conspiracy theory, as fiction. They will employ their immense resources to discredit it, to bury it once more. They will attempt to get you to believe the world is just as it appears, that great men are merely lucky, and that history is merely a string of chance events. But you will know better. You will know of the house on Beacon Hill. You will know of the wasted prince in the hospital. You will know of Elara, the murdered mastermind, and her kidnapped son, and of Elara and Isolde, the sisters imprisoned behind the glass of time. This information is now in your possession. It's a burden. What you do with it is your choice. You can reject it, ignore it, and return to the pleasant slumber they have prepared for you, or you can observe, you can listen, you can search for the fissures in the veneer. You can tell this tale, you can keep the fire burning, because the only thing a secret society of shadows really hates is the light. They can destroy documents, they can kill witnesses, they can set homes on fire, but they can't destroy a truth once it is planted in the hearts of millions. They are strong, but they are not as many as we are. There is one final piece of the story, a loose thread which has plagued me from the moment I opened Finch's journal, the Nightingale, the living instrument whose song entrapped the sisters within a time. What became of it? The cage Hewitt discovered among the ruins was bare. As Claire's letter stated, following the treatment, the unblinking man removed the bird and departed. He did not slay it. He put it back into its gilded cage and took it with him. Why? Why retain the key? Why not break it? The Senus Infinitum gives a feasible and completely frightening explanation. It says that the auditory trigger is singular and unrepeatable. Its particular harmonic signature is attached to the first procedure. As the key locks, the text reads, so too might it open. The same song that unites may also set free. The Fellowship maintained the Nightingale. For more than a century they must have kept it alive, using their own perverse science to keep it going, just as they had the sisters. It was their fail-safe, their reset button, the one thing that could reverse the stasis. Why would they want that? Maybe as a contingency in case the sisters' prison broke down, or maybe for a darker motive as the final bargaining tool, the threat of release used to keep the sisters psychologically compliant, or maybe the most horrifying option of all, they retained it because they planned to use it. They planned to awaken the sisters. Why? Why now? Speculation is all I can afford. Maybe their science has come so far that they can now fix the imperfections of the original stasis. Maybe they would like to observe their oldest subjects to see what can be learned from the 150-year-old experiment. Maybe they have a new mission for Alistair and Isolde to fulfill in the 21st century. Picture the prestige of having two living, breathing 17-year-old girls from the 1870s introduced to the world. It would be the ultimate revelation, the ultimate show of strength, a method of finally coming out of the shadows and being worshipped as deities. The Callahan sisters' return is perhaps not the end of the conspiracy, perhaps the beginning of its final phase in public, the day they come out to the world. Thus the pursuit of the truth doesn't end with an end, but with suspense, a game of wait. We wait for the Fellowship to move, and I think that move is imminent. The pieces I've got, the tale I've given you, it is not a lesson in history. It is a living threat to their secrecy, and they will act. They always do. I have no idea how it will manifest. Maybe it will be a subtle campaign of misinformation. Maybe it will be an overt assault on the basis of this information about me, but I've protected myself just as Finch did. I have sent his diary, Clara's epistle, all of my research to numerous trusted individuals in numerous nations with instructions for automatic release. If I am to suffer an untimely accident or be declared Amati, I have learned the lesson of history. I will not bury this truth yet again. But the best protection is not my own array of dead man switches. It's you, your attention, your memory, your unwillingness to embrace the comforting lies. Each retelling of this story, each new person learning of the Callahan sisters, makes the Fellowship's hold on the world just a little looser. They get their power from our ignorance. Our power comes from our shared understanding. This is the war. They have been waging war in the shadows for more than a century. Absol fought for dominion over reality itself, and tonight, whether you knew it or not, you've been conscripted as a fighter in that war. You've been presented with a map of the battlefield and a look at the enemy, an enemy who has been living in plain sight, an enemy who has determined the world. You were born into an adversary who thinks you're just fuel for their machine. But they're wrong. The human spirit, the need for truth, for justice, it is a force of nature they've never been able to quite quash. Not in Lagre, not in Finch, and not in the two sisters who torched their own prison. Regularly consider the vial of glowing liquid that I still own, the pure life force sample that Finch took from Thomas's bedroom. It resides in a lid-lined box in a safe, undisclosed location. It is the final physical evidence from that period, the final materialized memory of the machine. At times I find myself wanting to destroy it, to pour it into the ground and watch it disperse. It's like a tainted thing, a repository of all that pain and anguish. But I can't because it's something else too. It's evidence. It's the only thing their science can't rationalize. It is the impossible thing that proves the impossible account to be true. And it might be the secret to reversing their work. If Lenora's brilliance could be reverse engineered from this sample, if her initial benevolent intentions could be re-established, perhaps a real cure could be achieved, not only for the sisters, but for the disease of greed and power that gave birth to them. Maybe the cure for fellowship is in the very thing they made to nourish themselves. A poetic justice I believe Dr. Finch would have enjoyed. This is my wish, that this tale shall not only be a warning but a stimulus, that it shall motivate a new generation of researchers, of scientists, of truth-tellers, who shall not be deterred, who shall take up the trail that Finch set out, who shall have the courage to pose the forbidden questions, and who shall once and for all lay bare the Stygian Fellowship to the light. The truth is out there, scattered through files, secreted away in ancient letters, lost in the jargon of corporate accounts. It's a 1,000,000-piece puzzle. I have given you the quarter pieces. You fill in the rest. Seek the patterns, challenge the timelines, track the money, and never ever think that history is settled. It is a living, breathing entity, and it can be reinterpreted. The ghosts of history are talking. It's time we began to listen. What is the nature of being timeless? We idealize the concept. We think of it as a state of perfection, eternal youth, boundless beauty. But the tale of the Callahan sisters teaches us otherwise. To be timeless is to be lifeless. Life is movement. Life is change. Life is growth and withering. It is the constant, ugly, lovely process of becoming. To freeze that process is to do a violence so deep against the very fabric of existence. It is to form a statue, and not a man. The Stygian Fellowship in their hubris thought they were defeating death, but they did not. They simply invented a finer, more terrifying version of it, a living death, a soul death, in a shell of immobile flesh. And through their desire to dominate life, they became the greatest servants of death, devouring infinite lives to sustain their delusion of continuity. They are the real withered princes. Their souls have been rotting for 150 years. Even as their power increases, this is the greatest paradox of their might. To retain all, they had to lose themselves. They are the ghosts now, wandering the halls of power, their humanity a fading memory supplanted by an icy, calculating appetite for domination. And the sisters, whether sleeping in a vault or were incinerated, they are the ultimate casualty of that appetite. They are the embodiment of all that is beautiful, all that can be, all that lives to be offered up at the altar of power. Theirs is not merely a history, it is the history of our world told in Gothic horror terms. It is the tale of what we give up as individuals, and a society when we let a frightened minority set the terms of our lives. It is the secret that forms the foundation of our civilization. But secrets do have an expiration date, and this one has well exceeded it. The truth seeps through, and it cannot be kept hidden any longer. Ultimately, this is a choice. You can choose to believe or choose to disbelieve. You can view it as a complex web of facts, rumors, and guesses about the past, or you can view it as a glimpse of the machinery of the world that lies hidden. But I want you to think about this. If such a power did exist, a power to freeze time, to wipe out people, to dominate history, isn't this precisely what the world is like? A world of inexplicable disparities, of near invulnerable dynasties, of centuries of secrets and deceptions. A world in which the official version never quite adds up. Perhaps the most impressive con the Fellowship ever committed was not fooling the world into believing they didn't exist, but fooling us into believing that this fractured, manipulated world is the only one that can exist, that this is just the way things are. They've made their monstrosity normal. They've turned their prison into our reality. Dr. Finch passed away thinking that he was a failure. He passed away alone in an asylum, his reputation tarnished, his life's work lost. He never knew if the journal was found. He never knew if the truth would ever be known. But he did. He stood up. He spoke out. He wrote it all down in the hope that one day someone would listen. Tonight we have listened. We have witnessed his bravery. We have heard the whispers of Clara, the cries of Elara and Isolde, the silent cry of Thomas. We have paid tribute to the memory of Lenora. We have drawn one thread of darkness from the tapestry of deceptions, and we have watched how it is entwined within it all. This information does not bring us peace. It brings us a awful clarity. It is a burden, but it is a weapon. It is the light that the darkness cannot bear. Use it wisely. 2. My search isn't ended. It is only just starting. There are more names in Finch's diary, more families in the Stygian Fellowship. They have their reach spread far beyond Boston. They have roots in New York, in London, in the seats of power everywhere on earth. The tale of the Callahan sisters is only the beginning. There are more experiments, more victims, more secrets buried as deeply. I will keep following threads. I will keep digging. I will not rest until the whole stinking edifice is laid bare. But I cannot do this by myself. This is too large for an individual. It needs to be a group effort, a community of searchers who are willing to look beyond the veil. This is my challenge to you. Don't watch passively. Be an active researcher. Research your own local histories. Search for the prominent families that appear to have no beginning. Search for the odd coincidences, the suspicious deaths, the destroyed documents. The fellowship was not limited to Boston. They had franchises. They had affiliates. The pattern exists if you learn to look for it. The serpent in the lotus symbolism can show up in the most unlikely places. On a weathered cornerstone, in the emblem of a business logo, in the glass of a church window. These are their signposts. Their subtle claims of ownership. They think they own the past. They think they own the future. It is time to demonstrate they are mistaken. It is time to reclaim our story. The truth is a powerful and risky thing, but it is the only thing that ever will set us free. This is my first contribution. There are more to come. The ghosts of the past have been given their voice, and they will not be silenced once more. The world is going to be changed. So what's left to you? A dark story of a forgotten corner of American history. But it's more than that, isn't it? You sense it, that cold nod of recognition in your belly. The sense that this story somehow is true, not necessarily every detail, every name, but the essence of it, the notion of an unseen power, a hidden knowledge, a system that exists just out of sight. This is a truth that speaks to us on a primal level. We have always suspected that the world was not what it appeared to be. We have always sensed that there were strings being pulled by hidden hands. The tale of the Callahan sisters puts a name and a face to the feeling. It provides us with a framework to comprehend the things that don't quite add up, and that is why it is so strong. It confirms a suspicion that has haunted humanity for millennia. The feeling that we are not the only ones at the top of the food chain, that we have predators in our own midst who appear exactly like ourselves, but who play by a different set of rules with a different set of hunger. Predators who prey not on our bodies but on our time, on our energy, on our very tomorrow. This is not a story intended to leave you in terror. It is a story intended to leave you in anger, an angry anger, an anger of the betrayed, an anger of the exploited, an anger which can be translated into action, into watchfulness, into a call for the truth. The world is dark and confusing, but it is not lost. The beam of one candle can repel a tremendous darkness. Finch was a candle. Clara was a candle. You are a candle now, and we can build a fire together that they will never be able to put out. The story is no longer mine alone to tell. It is yours. The last eerie thought is this. The Stygian Fellowship's best-kept secret is perhaps not the stasis technology at all. Perhaps it is what they have learned from it. For 150 years they have watched in close proximity as the Callahan sisters' consciousness plodded by, immobile. They have observed them. What psychological observations have they made of two trapped souls? They have figured out how memory operates, how personality is built, how the human mind can be controlled, contained, and even programmed. They have had a flawless, isolated laboratory to become masters of the art of psychological manipulation. The body control technology was merely the beginning. The real prize has always been the mind control technology. And that is a technology I think they have mastered. That is why our world seems so disorienting, so polarized. It is why we are so distractible, so quick to anger, so quick to turn on each other. We are living in their biggest experiment. The things they learned from the two girls in the house on Beacon Hill are now being brought to bear on the entire world population. They are holding us all in suspended animation, stuck in circles of anger and diversion. They are the balladeers of a new electronic gale and night song, and it is holding us all down. Elara and Isolde's story is more than historical tragedy. It is a map for our current reality. Their silent eternal prison has been extended to include all of us. No, you know.